So 57. Is that what I'm looking at? Yeah. Just
What
pointing at the kit.
Yeah, pointing
Really?
at the snare. Yeah, why not?
Just for the hell of it.
for the hell of it.
Hey, Jess here. I'm coming at you from Seattle, Washington, where I am meeting with producer, engineer Lilian Blair.
Hi, welcome to the Vera Project.
Hi. Let's go.
So Lupe, can you please play a beat for us?
So Lilian, you are an audio engineer.
Uh-huh.
What does that mean? What do you do?
I put up a bunch of microphones and let people have fun.
Great. Okay, so we're here to talk about mics.
Yes.
Miking techniques, drums. So do you have to hear the drummer like beforehand? Like, because you obviously will do some research ahead of time as to what kind of album you're making.
Right. Well, ideally, especially if I'm producing something, I'll get coffee with people a few times, just sort of get to know them, get to know the kind of music that they want, see them play live a couple times.
Nice.
Also talk about reference mixes. Oftentimes those are like popular records that have been recorded in fancy studios. The latest project I'm working off of, the kids wanted to sound like Live Through This by Hole, which I'm like, yes, but we don't have a six-figure budget, so we're using cheaper microphones, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to set it up the way it would be set up in a big studio. That's why I have 18 mics set up right now. It's all about getting the detail and getting the options later on. Amongst a lot of the young bands that I see, there are so many influences from just all eras, and that's because they hear everything.
Yeah.
Right now, I feel like where we're going musically is sort of complex genre fusion. How do I balance their influences when it comes to the engineering? As I said, I'm going to start with the kick drum, simply because that is the order in my brain.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to start with the kick-in microphone. Now, the kick-in microphone, we're going to push that as close to the batter head as possible, because we really want that punch and that click from the batter head from that one.
Okay.
And since I'm going to be miking the resonant head as well, that way I can get my lows
From the exterior
exactly.
mic.
Next on my input list is my snare. I'm going to start with good old SM57. For the under mic, I'm using a Sennheiser E609. That is a guitar mic, but this is one of the microphones that I'll get a little experimental with. The point of the under mic is really to have control over how much of the snare rattle is in your mix. Anyway, now we're going to go over to the toms, and I'm going to start with this Audix F10 as my top mic on the rack. The F10 has a sort of 100 hertz boost to it, whereas the F12 is a little flatter. So similar frequency response to the Sennheiser 604s that you see clipped on the live drums all the time. I like the sound of these a little better. It's going to be relatively the same concept as the snare, though I am going to want a little bit more tone out of it. So instead of aiming it directly at the center, I'm going to aim it a little bit down. Sometimes you really want an intern to make them do all of the work for you. All right. So, tom. For my overheads, I'm using these AKGC 3000s. And now we have another of our big choices to make when it comes to miking drums. Do we want to do a drummer perspective or audience perspective?
Ooh.
Personally, I prefer drummer's perspective.
Yeah, I think most drummers are pretty drum-centric. I want the overall song to sound good and even, obviously, but if I'm not hearing all of the parts of my kit, I'm probably going to be upset.
Yeah, understandably.
And for me also, one of the tests I do with a record is how fun is it to air drum along? Yeah. And if my toms are in a different position, then it's going to be weird to be drumming over here when I'm hearing the floor tom.
Oh my gosh. gosh, I never thought about that.
It's very important. Air drumming, singing along in your car, and dancing along in your bedroom.
The
three big tests.
Okay. So let's talk about the room.
Oh.
As an engineer.
As an engineer.
How important is the room? How does the room affect what you're capturing?
The room is everything. And when I'm looking at a studio, that's the first thing I look at. I walk into the room, I clap my hands, I listen to the decay, listen for any reflections. It's particularly important these days when a lot of sort of mid to low tier studios are in locations that weren't originally for studios. Here at Vera, we have this nice room, no parallel walls, no right angles, nice small decay because we're in a small room, but a nice decay to it. And I find it's really versatile.
And you have the stairwell.
I have the stairwell, I have the elevator shaft.
Elevator shaft. Okay, so tell me about this angle.
All right, so one of the cool things about our design is we have this nice acute angle right here, and that's going to produce this really nice, really fun reflection, as well as having this flat piece of metal back here, which is going to produce another reflection. So what I like to do is do a bloom line pair in this corner. Now, the other microphone is going to pick up what's coming up from the stairwell.
That's awesome.
There we go.
Yeah.
I can do it. There we go. So you can hear the sustain that it has, and that will come up the stairwell, especially when we have loud drums going, and produce this nice sort of roomy reverb effect that's going to sound more real than if we're just sending any of the elements to a reverb. So by having them right on top of each other, when the sound hits it, they're going to hit at the same time, so they'll be in phase. Let's get our stairs going. And again, I'll solo those. So we are ADA accessible here, and we have this wonderful wheelchair elevator. And the fun thing about it is that it is metal. I am going to dangle the microphone down.
How far?
I don't know. How far should I go?
You tell me.
Usually about halfway. Let's bring in the elevator microphone now.
Yeah, can we solo that too?
Oh, absolutely. My whole approach to drumming is using a lot of rooms. I view the room as being an extension of the drummer's instrument. And it's the kind of thing where, again, just like having all these options for close miking, you get a lot of options as far as the sound that you get. I have the AKG 414s selected for these. And I'm using the 414s because they have multiple polar patterns. I'm going to be measuring because I want them equidistant, but I'm not going to measure against the snare because the rack tom's in the way. And I figure for these, we're now measuring against the kit itself rather than in any particular drum.
How do you, as the engineer, kind of push an artist? Maybe push isn't the right word, but yeah, how do you push them to like get that take, get the better take, or it's a fine line, it's a balance.
Yeah.
So how do you approach
And I wouldn't
that?
say as an engineer, I'd say as a producer. That's producery things. If I had if I was engineering for a producer, I would focus on getting all the technical stuff right, and they would be pushing the talkback button and giving the feedback. But since a lot of people these days tend to do both of those jobs, it is important for engineers to know how to communicate. When it comes to coaching takes, I initially sort of lay back a little bit. I'm mostly just getting a feel for the vibe. And then once I know what they're doing, have a sense for how it's changing across the takes, then I'll be able to give them the feedback that I want. Vocals, on the other hand, are completely different because vocals, to me, a vocalist is acting. They need to be able to emote through the speakers without the listener being able to see their face or their body language. And so you really need to get them in the mindset of the song. at times you need to think out of the box as far as getting your vocalist to give you the take that they want.
Yeah.
I have this wonderful elevator shaft, so I've put vocalists down the elevator shaft.
That's amazing.
And then they have this like claustrophobic feeling because they are in a small confined space. I've also had vocalists stand on stools because being 2 to 3 feet above the ground puts you in a different perspective.
Whoa.
And is that will come across in the performance. I try and structure my recording projects, getting as much as I can live, then coming up with weird stuff to do for overdubs, and then doing polished vocals. You need to be able to pretend that you're a teenager again. You need to think about the band's target audience, and most rock bands are at least going to be focusing on a younger audience. And so you need to, remember what it was like to hear something for the first time that felt new and exciting and dangerous. Like your parents are going to get pissed just by hearing the guitar tone. Even though our job is to get good takes and make people sound awesome and play our role in making their art that will last forever or until the end of civilization. We also need to keep in mind that this is about having fun.